I just want to welcome you into our house and into my family room today. Chris and I, we've lived in this house for about 3 years, but we've lived within miles of here since we were newlyweds. We've lived in the Cascade, Ada area since we were 22 years old, moving into our first house. But this house that we live in now and that we've lived in for 3 years, I love its location because if you're familiar with the kind of the eastern edge of Grand Rapids, we are halfway between the village of Ada and the village of Cascade. And what that means is I can leave our neighborhood and 2 miles one direction, 2 miles the other direction. I've got a grocery store in each direction. I've got a hardware store in each direction, have a bike shop in each direction. During the summer, I leave my driveway, and if I go either way, I can end up at an ice cream shop. There are pizza options and caffeine options in both directions, and a couple different restaurants, several different restaurants, and a couple different gas stations, depending on which direction I turn. So turn to the right, a couple miles, I end up in the village of Ada, and turn to the left, head down a couple miles, and I end up in the village of Cascade. So here's the question. When I reach the end of my neighborhood and I have to make a decision, do I turn right or do I turn left? And the answer is, that all depends on where I want to end up. It all depends on where I want to end up because roads lead to places. There's a pastor in Atlanta. His name is Andy Stanley, and he wrote this book called The Principle of the Path. And in The Principle of the Path, talking about the roads we take, Andy Stanley just said this. He said, your direction determines your destination. Your direction determines your destination. You go, well, yeah, that's kind of obvious. It's very simple, and yet it's very profound. Because when Andy Stanley said your direction determines your destination, he's not talking about which way to turn in order to get your ice cream fix or a cup of coffee or your bike tuned up or a restaurant or fill your car up with gasoline. He's talking about life direction. Your direction, your life direction determines your destination. And in this brand new series that we begin this weekend, it's a series that'll take us from the middle of April to the middle of June, roughly 2 months long. We're calling the series The Way of the Wise. Think about that term, your direction, whether you turn to the right or to the left. We're calling this the way of the wise. And in our Bible, Old Testament of our Bible, you find the book of Proverbs. And the Proverbs, many of them are wisdom nuggets that were either written or compiled by wise King Solomon of Jerusalem about 900 or 1,000 years before the time of Jesus. And something that happens in the Proverbs again and again and again is it talks about the path. It talks about the way. It talks about life direction, what we're calling the way of the wise. Because listen, it might seem like life is just made up of these random, disconnected, like 100 disconnected choices. But make enough choices over a long enough period of time, and suddenly you discover that you have a very well-worn path in life. My friends, you are traveling a road. So think about it this way. Every day we choose a way. Be careful which road you get on, because roads lead places. So let's jump into Proverbs chapter 4. And just right out of the gate, what I want to show you in Proverbs chapter 4, which is kind of a part of the introduction to the Proverbs. It's shown as a father figure pleading with his son. It's like he's going, listen to me. Please pay attention. Be very careful what road you get on. And I want you to pay attention to the terms road and path as they occur in just a couple of verses we want to look at in Proverbs chapter 4. And so Proverbs chapter 4, verse 11, it's like the father figure saying, I instruct you in, here we go, I instruct you in the way of wisdom and lead you along the straight paths. And then a couple verses later, don't set your foot on the path of the wicked, or walk, here again, in the way of evildoers. He's pleading with his kid and saying, listen, you gotta listen to me. You gotta absorb this. There are some people in this world that are going directions radically different than the direction you need to go, and they're going to end up in destinations that you don't want to see. Do not set your foot on their path or walk in the way of evildoers. And then down near the end of the chapter, verse 26, be careful, give careful thought to the paths of your feet, and be steadfast in all your ways. There it is through Proverbs chapter 4, your path, your way, your way, your path, your path, your way. It's not that life is like 100, disconnected, random choices. After a while, we have a well-worn path. My friends, we find ourselves on a road, and roads lead places. That's why in our, it's common in the way we talk to talk about the way. It sounds kind of like this, is, well, you know the way he treats his wife, or you know the way that she reacts to her husband, or you've seen the way that they parent. Man, don't talk to her. You know the way she reacts when someone tries to give her correction. We talk about the way. That is, enough decisions in a row start creating this path or this road. And roads have fairly predictable destinations. We could talk about the way that we deal with our finances, the way that we talk about people when they're not around, the way that we speak to people when they're standing there. We can talk about the way we treat people who aren't quite as economically secure as we are. We talk about the way we use our time, the way we choose our friends, the way that we respond when someone tries to give advice or correction. You see, life is not just hundreds of random, disconnected decisions. Enough decisions in a row. And we found ourselves on a well-worn path, a way, a road. And roads lead places. Every day we choose a way. And so let me just stop right now. In the middle of all of this virus stuff that's going on, can I just ask you right now, what road have you been on? Relationally, spiritually, in your conversations with your friends, with colleagues at work. What road have you been on? What if today is a phenomenal opportunity to dive into some of these Proverbs? What if we could talk today about some of the roads that we take and where those roads lead? Be careful what road you take. Every road leads somewhere. So what I want to do is just want to take like the Proverbs. They cover so many different areas of life, to work, to business ethics, to treatment of other people. But I've just selected just 3 different life areas that every day I believe we make decisions. Every day we respond to a wise way or a foolish way in these 3 areas. And area number 1, I just want to talk about the path we take in relationship to our words. Over and over again in the Proverbs, you have these terms, the words, the lips of the wise, the lips of the foolish, the mouth of the wise, the words of the patient. And so just look at a couple of these little wisdom nuggets, these Proverbs with me. I love this one here. It just says, notice the words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. This is found in Proverbs chapter 12. Reckless words pierce like swords. This is a sword that I happen to have in my personal arsenal. My oldest son, Andrew, bought this for me years ago. I think it was for a birthday or a Christmas present. I don't remember asking for it. Apparently, the answer to the question, what do you get for the peaceful pastor who owns everything he needs, is sharp hand weaponry. So Andrew purchased this for me. Isn't it wild that this is the image for our reckless words? Does this seem harsh to you? Kind of extreme? The words of the reckless, they lacerate, they stab, they pierce, they puncture. Why can't you do anything right? Get out of the way. Why do I have to do everything myself? You're just like your dad. Reckless words. They pierce, they stab, they lacerate. This is why in many of our families and in many of our workplaces, it's like people are hemorrhaging from reckless words. Reckless words pierce like a sword. But there's a flip side. But the tongue of the wise, understand, it's like two roads. It's like, which road are you going to take with your words? Here's the other road. But the tongue of the wise brings healing. Never underestimate the power. Never underestimate the power of encouraging words. The tongue of the wise brings healing. I'm so proud of you. You know, every time you walk into a room, it's like your smile brightens up the room. Hey, thank you for being on time. It seems like you are just so punctual in showing up to work and ready to work. Thank you for doing that. Wise words bring healing. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. I brought way too much intensity to that conversation. I need you to forgive me. Every day we choose a way. After a while, our vocabulary, our language patterns, we create a well-worn path. And it can either be a path that is marked by verbal destruction, or it's a path that is marked by verbal healing. Another proverb, this one happens to be in Proverbs chapter 16. Here's another proverb or wisdom nugget that also has this healing theme. Gracious words are like a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. Now, honey, in like the Old Testament times, the ancient Near East, it was like the all-purpose sweetener. You know, we use refined sugar. You know, I put sugar in some tea. They used honey as the all-purpose sweetener. And it's kind of like gracious words, words of kindness. Man, it's like a honeycomb, sweet to the soul. And here again, healing to the bone. Never underestimate the healing power of words. Something I've discovered. It's almost never the first comment that unravels an evening. It's like there's one comment that's a little demeaning, has a little barb or a little edge, but often it's not that comment that is the evening's undoing. It's a comment with a little bit more edge and velocity in response to that comment. Then there's a response to the response, and then a response to that response, and you end up going, yeah. There goes the evening. I want to challenge you with something, particularly this week, and particularly those of you that are at home with family all day. Be on your guard about that second comment. Wise King Solomon in another proverb would say, a soft answer turns away wrath. A soft answer. Being able to bring a conversation down a little instead of seeing the conversation escalate. It's almost always the second comment that leads toward the undoing of an evening. Now, my point here isn't that I want you to have a pleasant evening. Of course, I do want you to have a pleasant evening. But this isn't about one evening. Stack up enough of these evenings together, and all of a sudden you have a year of evenings, or 3 years of evenings, or 5 years of evenings. You see, again, it's not 100 disconnected choices. After a while, these form a well-worn path, a road. And my friends, roads lead places. Every day I choose a way. I choose a way with my words. You choose a way with your words. Now, this material was written or compiled hundreds of years before the time of Jesus. But if I may, I just want to take a gospel moment. If I can leave the Proverbs for a second and move to the time of the New Testament of your Bible, that is the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus and the Jesus community that would grow up. And these people were followers of the Christ. We would call them Christians. But the word Christian is rarely used in your Bible. I think it's like only 2 or 3 times the word Christian is used. I don't think they called themselves Christians. It's interesting. One of the terms that is used for them is the disciples, the followers of Christ. But another term that is used for them, are you ready? Another term that is used for the Jesus group is this. They were called the Way. Because there was a new way that replaced the old way. The new way that they found themselves in was anchored in the fact that the Son of God came and lived and died and was raised for them, and this formed their new identity. And it was no longer an identity of rejection or abandonment. It was an identity of they were welcomed into God's family. This was their platform in how to relate and respond to each other as part of the way. And so the Apostle Paul, when he was coaching Jesus followers, people of the way, living near the city of Ephesus, he would word it this way. He would say, be kind and be compassionate to one another, forgiving each other. Now, check out this last foundational bit. Just as in Christ, God forgave you. Just as through the burial and resurrection, through the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ that they had responded to, God forgave you. Listen, why should I be kind to her? Why should I be kind to him? Why should I be kind to them? Why should I forgive? Why should I extend compassion to someone who's really being a jerk? And the answer is just as in Christ, God forgave you. Here we are again. It's forgiveness in and it's forgiveness out. It's grace in and it's grace out. It's love in and it's love out. The reason that I need this gospel moment with you is that I am convinced that so many of us are volatile with our words, angry with our words, and impatient with our words because we're living out of the pain of the past. Paul is pleading with these young Christians. When you speak out of your identity of the present, not out of the pain of your past. Speak out of your new identity as one who is loved and accepted by God. not out of your old identity, whatever abandonment, betrayal, desertion that may have given you. This is the foundation for the new way. See, every day we choose a way. These aren't 100 random decisions, but they form a well-worn path, a road, and roads lead places. And I would just ask you right now, is it possible that today is the day to get on a better road in relationship to your words? And so you go, Jeff, man, it's hard. It's just hard to get on a better path with my words. The friends that I have are just so negative. The friends that I have, they're just so gossipy. And then I kind of get sucked into that. Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what? Let's talk about your friends and how they affect you. I need you to buckle up for this one. In Proverbs, the deal about friendship is this. Friends tend to rub off on each other. So be very careful about who you are spending a lot of time with. In the Proverbs chapter 22, it sounds like this. Do not make friends with a hot-headed person. Do not associate with one easily angered. And you go, why? Why? Don't make friends with someone quick-tempered. Why? And the next verse finishes it. It says, or you may learn their ways and get yourself ensnared. Be careful what friendships you form, because friends tend to rub off on each other. If you have a friend in your inner circle friend group who is highly volatile, and someone like wounds you a little bit, and they go, they did that? Well, let me tell you what I do. It's possible that that's not a helpful conversation. If you hang out with people that are constantly complaining, constantly criticizing, there's a strong possibility that you could end up with a highly complaining and critical spirit. This isn't the only proverb that talks about friendship in this way. It says, walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. Do you see it here? Be very careful who you hang out with. Because friends end up rubbing off on each other. What these Proverbs is just saying is this. If the people you run with tend to overspend, bar hop, and leap from one romantic fling to another, there's a chance that over time, your life might be marked by overspending, bar hopping, and leaping from one romantic fling to another, because friends often rub off on each other. And you kind of go, yeah, but Jeff, aren't Christians supposed to love everybody? Yeah. The distinction I'm making here is the difference between being friendly and who you invite into your inner circle. That is, those closest 2, 3, 5 friends in life. You see, you can be friendly to all kinds of people, regardless of their life choices. But those 2, 3, 5 people that you invite in as traveling companions in life, choose them carefully, because you're likely to become like them. Here you go. Let me put it this way. I really don't think it's possible to fail at friendship and succeed at life. I don't think it's possible to fail brilliantly at friendship and to succeed brilliantly at life. Now, some of you are wondering, okay, Pastor Manion, help me with this one. How do I locate these perfect friends and get them to hang out with me? Well, I almost forgot. Back to the overspending, bar hopping, jumping from one relationship fling to another. You remember the movie The Matrix? I mean, it's got to be like 20 years old now. Near the beginning of the movie, there's this scene where Neo is waiting under an overpass. It's just raining. It is just pouring rain. And then Trinity pulls up. She's sitting in the back seat. There's a driver, someone else in the front seat. The door opens and Neo climbs in. They head down the road. Then the car stops and he's about to get out. And there's this brief conversation that takes place where Trinity tries to convince Neo to stay with the group. And some of you already know what she says. She says, because you've been down there, Neo. You know that road. You know exactly where it ends. And I know that's not where you want to be. Listen, in relationship to your friendships, you know that road. You know exactly where it ends. And listen, right now, there's just some areas of your life where I would say, I know that's not where you want to end up. Because roads lead to fairly predictable destinations. Now back to that deal about that perfect friend before the Matrix recess. I think what we need to focus here on is not perfection, but simply direction. It's not attempting to find a friend that is totally spiritually mature. But do they have a desire to grow spiritually and to become mature? See, what's their direction? Do they have a desire, at least a desire, to give of their time in the service of others? Do they at least have a desire to work on the marriage that they are in? Are they even trying to live within their means? If they have an addiction in the past, are they like trying to break away from it and find a new path and live in a new way? This is not about perfection. It's just about direction. Do they have a desire to leave a life of complaint and to pursue a life of gratitude? It's not perfection, it's direction. And I would say, may our gracious God bless your journey with friends who share a common positive direction. Now, I want to go to the third life area today from the Proverbs, and I would be tempted to say, this is the most important one. It's probably not true. I mean, I think that all of these areas are critical. But let me just say that this next one is huge. And I believe it's really huge right now as all of us are coping in at least one way or another with this virus and the way it's affecting our lives. And that is our time. Now, as I have conversations with people throughout the week, it is so strange how radically different the coronavirus is affecting our time. There are some of you that haven't worked harder in years. I mean, you are up at it every day, video conferencing. We run into people who are working overtime hours in grocery stores. We hear from people in the medical field, whether they're doctors or whether they're nurses or whether they're with facilities, just keeping a facility healthy and clean. And let me just stop right now and just say, we just want to thank you. And we just want to honor those of you who are on the front lines of this and working so hard to serve others every day in this time. But you may have no free time than you've ever had before and maybe less. We hear from parents who are trying to work from home and simultaneously constant interruptions during the day to try to keep their kids on track with homework. And so we've got like one extreme is just people way busier than normal. And we also encounter the other extreme with people that have been laid off or furloughed, where they just have time to burn. I would plead with you, whichever side you find yourself on, don't let this season go wasted. The Proverbs, they talk about something called diligence. There's this recurring character in the Proverbs. I think he shows up like 14 times. It's called the sluggard. The sluggard is the person who cannot get away from the tractor beam of the couch, who just kind of like sleeps through life. And on the other side is a person who is diligent and gets up and gets it done. And so many of the Proverbs are like one verse. This thing on the sluggard and the ant, what I've called ant power in the past, it's like it unfolds in three connected verses. And so the first one is just like, go to the ant, you sluggard, consider its ways. Here we are, we're back to the way. Consider its ways and be wise. If the tractor beam of the couch has this hold on you, the advice here is go to the anthill. Watch this little critter back and forth, carrying seeds and storing it up for a difficult season ahead. It says it has no commander or overseer or ruler. The idea here is there's no boss barking at the ant saying, and I've got to have that done by 3:00 tomorrow. There seems to be an element of self-starter, self-motivation here. And then the third verse is just, yet it stores up provisions in summers and gathers its food in harvest. It's kind of like, here's this little critter going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, one seed at a time, back to the anthill, then back to the field, then back to the anthill, then back to the field, preparing itself for the future. What you have with the ant is repetitive, maybe a little boring, but it's slow and it's steady and it's consistent and it's life-giving. And my plea to you in this season is just this word diligence. It's just don't let this season go wasted. Don't let this season go wasted. Listen, for those of you who usually have kids at school and now kids are at home, this could be a frustrating time on many levels. It is also true that you may have more time with this second grader than you will have for the rest of your life. Don't let this go wasted. College and universities shut down. You might have a college student back home who had no plans of living in your house this semester. You might have more quality conversation with his 18, 19, 20-year-old than you have had in years and might have for years. Don't let this go wasted. Those of you who are not only working, but working hard, ask your gracious God to empower you to bring your full self to your work, that you might bring yourself day after day after day to whatever that good work is. Don't let this season go wasted. And on the other side of the continuum, I just know there are some of you who right now it's just hard to find a schedule. You have more free time on your hands and no ability to go out and hang out with friends or have friends over. You know, at one point in your life, you thought that it was humanly impossible for a person to actually watch everything listed on Netflix. And now you're coming to the point where you think you might actually pull it off. My plea to you, don't let this season go wasted. I mean, we're looking at some beautiful temperatures this week. Man, get outside. Walk around your neighborhood, a bike ride, a hike. If you have a yard, work in the garden. Some of you will have more opportunity to read in this season that you've had for years. Just find a book that is nurturing and life-giving. Chip away at it a couple chapters a day. And those of you that goes, dude, I hate to read. Find a life-giving podcast that builds your mind and that builds your heart. Listen to an episode or two a day. Don't let this season go wasted. This isn't just about creating a to-do list. For many of us, we need a stop doing list. We need to disconnect from network news that has a magnetic pull to drama and conflict and drama, and it is dragging us down. We need to turn off the TV. These weeks that are going by, don't spend these weeks glued to Facebook. Go to the ant. Diligence, slow and steady faithfulness, chip away at something good. Walk away from this season and have ways that you go, I did not waste that space. These seems like 100 disconnected choices. My friends, over time, they form a road, a way, a well-beaten path. There ends up being a way that we relate to our words, a way that we relate to friends, and a way we relate to time. Don't let this season go wasted. Choose wisely. I'm going to take a turn here, and I want to introduce a 60-day challenge that I'm going to invite you into. As we begin this series, from the middle of April to the middle of June, I am absolutely convinced that what you get out of this series will have less to do with the sermons on the weekend and more to do with what you do between those weekends. Whether you are crazy busy, whether you have lots of time on your hand, listen, this is an all skate. We would love to have each and every one of you participate in what we're calling the Wisdom Challenge, the 60-day Wisdom Challenge. There are 3 parts to it. Part number 1, read. There are 31 chapters in the book of Proverbs. There are roughly 30 or 31 days in each month. Does anyone sense that a reading program is on your horizon here? The read is this. The read is this. The read is simply read the chapter of Proverbs that corresponds with the day of the month. April 21, read Proverbs chapter 21. May 5, read Proverbs chapter 5. Over this 60-day challenge, you will read through the entire book of Proverbs 2 complete times. I ask you to join me in taking the Wisdom Challenge. It involves reading the chapter of Proverbs that coincides with that day of the month. If you can put your hands on a calendar, you will know what your reading assignment is for that day. Part 2 is to write. Here is the problem with these Proverbs, these little wisdom nuggets. Some chapters have 20-some, 30-some of these, and these are not intended to be digested in bulk. A proverb really begins to work its way into our mind and heart when we let it marinate in our life, when we think about it. And so after the reading assignment of reading a chapter of Proverbs, pick one verse and by hand physically write that verse down. Physically write that proverb down, whether it's on a 3x5 card or whether it's in your journal, kind of go, that one right there, that one verse, that's for me. That's the one I need to focus on today. Proverbs 12:18, the words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Pick one that is for you from that chapter and write it out by hand. That's part 2. Part 3, share it with another human being. Families might be doing this at the end of the day. Which proverb did you choose? Which proverb did you choose? People in small groups might be texting each other and saying, this was the proverb that I wrote down today, but share it with another human being. This, my friends, is the wisdom challenge and the 60-day challenge. Write one down each day and share it with another human being. I believe the next 60 days, what you do between the messages, between the weekends, can leave an indelible mark in your life. It has to do with the road we choose, because every day we choose a way. I live at a great spot. I pull out of my neighborhood, and a couple miles to the right, I've got a hardware store and a grocery store and coffee shop. A couple miles to the left, I've got a gas station and a bike shop and a pizza place. So when I exit my neighborhood, do I turn to the left or do I turn to the right? It all depends on where I want to end up. Roads lead places. Roads lead places. Devote yourself to the way of the wise. It is never too late to choose a new path. So thank you for joining us on this day. Thank you for meeting me in my family room as we launch this new and important series together. May our gracious God be with your relationships this week, be with your words this week, and help you organize your time in a way that honors the Lord who came here for you. We'll see you next week.